So welcome to the New Jersey Coastal Resilience Collaborative Technical Assistance Coffee Chat on the NJ Restoration Tool Organization Suite, also known as NJ Restores. My name is Amanda Archer, and I will serve as your facilitator today. I work for the Jacques Cousteau National Estuarine Research Reserve, and we serve as a partner of the NJCRC. For those who are here for the first time, the NJCRC is a network of coastal resilience professionals, and the purpose of this coffee chat program is to better facilitate connections between local communities and decision makers with NJCRC members, and also build capacity towards resilience. I also serve as the NJCRC Workgroup Lead for Technical Assistance Coffee Chats. The NJCRC has many other work groups that range from ecosystem monitoring to municipal planning. If you're interested in participating in the NJCRC work groups, it allows you access to connect with practitioners working on resilience initiatives from a wide variety of sectors. Before we get started, I'd just like to remind everyone that the views expressed during this technical assistance coffee chat are the presenter's own and do not reflect the official policies or positions of the New Jersey Coastal Resilience Collaborative or any of its organizational partners. I ask that all participants please stay on mute while our speakers are presenting. If you have questions, you may put them in the chat and we will address those during our discussion after today's demonstrations. For those of you who are filling in, we have people entering their name, job title, and organization into the chat so we know who's here with us today, and you're welcome to do so as well. So today's coffee chat is on the NJ Restoration Tool Organization Suite, which hosts a suite of habitat restoration planning tools in the form of an organized roadmap that takes you from location identification to restoration approaches. The NJ Restores is one component of a larger strategy to equip coastal municipal planners and nonprofit partners with the resources to plan, coordinate, and implement coastal restoration projects that support community resilience, ecosystem health, and carbon sequestration. So today, we will hear from the Rutgers University and Nature Conservancy NJ Restores collaborators, and follow along with the site-level project planning demo from ACT engineers. So I'd like to introduce you to our NJ Restores panel speakers today. We have Bill Shadell, who has been a coastal projects manager at the Nature Conservancy since 2018. He has 30 years of experience, mostly in ecological restoration within the public, for-profit, and nonprofit sectors. We have Dr. Rick Lathrop, who is the director of the Rutgers University Center for Remote Sensing and Spatial Analysis, and also serves as a professor of environmental monitoring. Working with partners, he translates that understanding into effective and appropriate techniques to improve on-the-ground natural resource management and land use planning. The third panelist speaker today is ACT Engineers President Eric Rosina, who utilizes his 30+ years of experience in environmental consulting in the management and coordination of both site remediation and permitting projects. Eric's background includes coastal restoration and navigation channel maintenance, hazardous site remediation, wetland delineation, and land use permitting. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to open up a poll for everyone. So we would like to know how you or your organization is involved in restoration projects. So you can check the best two that apply to your work. We'd like to see who is here in the room with us today. I'm going to give you all about 15 more seconds to answer. And if you did answer other, we'd love to know what that other is. So if you'd like to enter it in the chat, feel free. Okay, let's see. I ended the poll and we're gonna show you the results. So it seems like we have a lot of protection and conservation folks in the room, regulation and or permitting, technical or consulting, some public service members. So we have a little bit of everything. Love to see that. Thank you for participating in that poll. Okay, so we're going to move on to Bill Shadell from the Nature Conservancy, who's going to give us a quick intro to the NJ Restores project and how it came to be.
Thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. I just want to give you a little background, particularly Nature Conservancy's perspective on how we got here, why we're at the table. I want to acknowledge a lot of people, organizations, and agencies have contributed to this. So this is not a Nature Conservancy only thing by any means. It's actually a lot of work by a lot of really smart and good people. The history really up until now, as we see it, is in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy in the New Jersey coastal community. There's a big focus on community resilience, and everyone recognized, or many recognize, the need for a lot of these online tools or web applications to help people plan and coordinate coastal restoration projects with an emphasis on community resilience and adaptation, so that all projects that help protect communities aren't just hard gray infrastructure, that nature is part of the solution. These tools have other purposes and can be used in any way the user wants, but that was a big emphasis of why these started, at least on the TNC side. So TNC led the creation of various web-based tools, working with not only Rutgers, but the Stockton Coastal Research Center and Stevens Institute of Technology. Those were on a separate website called coastalresilience.org. It's still out there. There's a whole bunch of TNC applications for various states and around the world. And since that time, Rutgers also developed tools like the Flood Mapper and associated data. So we basically had New Jersey coastal planning tools in 2 different locations. And then the Nature Conservancy website, basically the platform wasn't supported. All the applications have to either be rewritten or removed. And so we assessed, do we in New Jersey at the Nature Conservancy need these tools anymore? Are they useful? And so we assessed, and there was a lot of actually duplication at this point between some of the things we had and what Rutgers had. But there was 2 unique tools we thought still have applicability, and we wanted to see migrated over to Rutgers so that New Jersey has essentially a one-stop shop for these tools instead of everybody going to 2 different sites. And those 2 tools are the Marsh Explorer and the Living Shorelines Explorer. And so this vision was shared by many partners to create this one-stop shop. And that's what this NJ Restores is. Rutgers rewrote and upgraded the tools. And not only does it house the Nature Conservancy tools, Marsh Explorer, Living Shorelines Explorer, but other tools created by the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary and NJDEP with a host of other partners. So that's really our perspective on how we arrived here and why I'm getting to introduce this. Rick and his team recently wrapped up. This is a rollout of the tools that we contracted Rutgers to upgrade and move over. And a few more things I just want to say. I want to acknowledge private donors to the Nature Conservancy, which is how we paid for Rutgers to do this work. I also want to acknowledge that much of the data for these tools, web applications, however you want to call them, comes from government sources, much of it from New Jersey DEP. Without those data sources, tools like these would not be possible. So we need to acknowledge that. And just finally, we're all very interested in hearing from you all now and that in the future about if these tools are you would use them or not, if you would use, or maybe somebody in your organization would use them. And if you do use them, how to improve them to make them more user-friendly, et cetera. This is a first rollout. The idea of having all these tools in one place that you can move between them is unique. It's this vision others have had. It's almost like this one tool to rule them all, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan. So that's how we got here, and I'm looking forward to the presentations.
Thanks, Bill. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Rick Lathrop.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So I want to thank Amanda for organizing today, and Bill for that introduction. So NJ Restores, as Amanda mentioned, so this organization suite, the idea was to be able to bring together a number of tools and then to build off of that. So NJ Restores, and we host it here at Rutgers. I'll go through this quickly, but again, to reiterate this point, that this has really been a development of a coalition of a number of different partners. And so trying to bring things together into a more seamless integration so users can work from scoping, issue scoping through project evaluation. So I really think of this NJ Restores as a community of practice. And again, the idea is it's a community practice, a group of people who share common concerns, set of problems and interest, and want to come together to fulfill both individual and group goals. And so this is where, we see NJ Restores as a platform to help share best practices and create new knowledge and advance professional practice. And integration is an key component of this. So a number of you on the call have been involved in we had some scoping meetings, we had some beta test meetings, and so all of that has been integral in terms of improving and developing and building this tool in the past, but also moving into the future. So we envision this as a workflow, the idea going from a statewide perspective, and that's where the Coastal Ecological Restoration and Adaptation Planning Explorer, so CRAP, and some of you may have used that particular tool. Then kind of drilling down in terms of more issue identification, in terms of once you've chosen an area of interest to be able to explore the marsh there. Some of these tools are based on, as Bill mentioned, a variety of different GIS data sets, but in recognizing in certain cases, you're going to need to go to the site level, incorporate site level information. And that's where the watch tool comes in. And then thinking about, okay, what approaches might be most applicable? And so the Living Shorelines Explorer, and I'll give just some quick background, on those. And then other tools that we're building out, and the Marsh Futures Explorer is one that is in development right now. So again, we kind of see this as a workflow. There's also an iterative where you might use multiple tools and go back and forth between a variety of the different tools. So this all started from the CRAP, and so this is on the working with the NJDEP. And so again, starting from the CRAP, the idea is kind of this statewide perspective. And so trying part of the impetus for the CRAP was to get a better handle on where people are working with in the state, what areas are they concerned about, where they might have areas of concern, but also particular projects in the work. And so CRAP gives, one was to map 8 issues of concern that the community, the broader coastal community was interested in, especially the state. And so this provides a way to visualize the individual issues of concern or in composite. And then there's other additional data sets associated with, some of the underlying data that went into the issues of concern, as well as broader administrative data for context in terms of land cover and administrative data in terms of municipal boundaries, landscape project and the like. Within the individual areas and then the projects, this is where it was kind of a grassroots effort of soliciting information from a number of partners. And again, many of you may be on this call, where you're working, and then different information about who are some of the leads, what their key interests are in that particular place. Now, this might be projects that are just areas that people are working in or actively have a particular project or that is in permit or in review or actually going towards implementation. The plan is to update this information over the next year, is to go back to people that have submitted data to update this, and then to solicit a second round. The idea is that this was a starting point, and that was almost 4 years ago. So a lot has changed since then. Part of this is, given all this this database of project areas of interest, there's tools to be able to filter those, to see, what are particular habitat types that people are interested in, ownership. There's a number of different, in terms of being able to filter by the various fields, and then to be able to display those on screen to get further information. This then moves into, once you've got an area that you're particularly interested in, to then go into the Marsh Explorer. And so from CRAP, there, all these tools, you can go forward, you can go backward in terms of the workflow. But the Marsh Explorer, the focus here was to basically subdivide or delineate New Jersey salt marshes into different marsh units of 300 acres or less. So these are contiguous marsh areas, and then to provide some information about those particular marshes. So in this particular example, we're looking at their alteration in terms of, for instance, mosquito ditching or open marsh water management, basically hydrological alterations to the marsh itself. So you can see the individual features, or you can also get, we classified these into the amount in terms of, part limited to partial to complete. There's, again, as part of the Marsh Explorer, there's additional information that might be relevant to that particular marsh unit. And then just a note, this, in terms of reference to Bill mentioned, we're pulling together credible, authoritative sources of information. In some cases, we're creating some new information as well. So for example, this is marsh retreat and likelihood of conversion by 2050. But all the different data sets, the little I button can then give you, go to that location to find out more information about the data set. And then these are all published map services. And so you can go to the actual, if you go to map service, you can then actually access the data itself. So if you wanted to bring that data set into your desktop to work on your own, and integrate it with your information, there's those data are all published and are there available. Okay, now let's take the next step. Is we're actually interested in implementing some kind of restoration technique, in this case along the shoreline. So interested in some kind of natural shoreline, living shoreline technique. And so this is where we incorporated, worked with Stevens to implement some of their engineering guidelines as to, based on some of the basic environmental criteria for a particular location, how many of those criteria were met and would be, for instance, nature-based solution. In this case, not necessarily, if you look here, this little cyan, for that particular shoreline, nature-based solution might not be the best approach in that, because of particular environmental characteristics. But in that case, an ecologically enhanced revetment might be more appropriate. So again, this is a kind of a scoping tool to allow us to get a firsthand look that you might then supplement with site level information. And as part of the living shorelines, we have information, some graphics on different shoreline types. Actually, the different criteria, these are some of the criteria that were looked at in terms of evaluate the applicability of these different shoreline techniques. Again, this is based on Stevens' work. And then there's also what we call municipal summaries, where we've gone in and summarized a lot of this information by municipality. And so it provides graphics and tables and the like that have been extracted for each municipality. And so those are available to download. As we go forward, there's additional tools based on feedback that we got from various user groups to be able to, in this case, to go in and digitize an area, shoreline of interest. And so this is, and then to be able to summarize, for that particular shoreline, the length of shoreline that might meet those particular engineering criteria. Again, to help folks plan out a particular project. Always, followed up with some further site level information. So that's where the watch tool comes in. This was developed by the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary. The two previous tools, the Marsh Explorer and then Living Shorelines, as Bill mentioned, that was work that basically started with the TNC's Coastal Resilience tool, and then migrated over. Partnership for the Delaware Estuary developed the watch tool, and this idea was to be able to enable on-site data to be used to evaluate the current condition and trajectory, and basically provides a hierarchical structure to guide the user. And again, this would incorporate additional information that that the user might have or go out to collect relevant to a particular site. So again, the whole kind of workflow going from the more general down to the more specific, and then even drilling down further. And then similar to the watch tool is the restoration feasibility model. And this calculates how achievable a project is based on a series of metrics, and that these metrics may be measured via desktop analysis, field data, or personal communication. So in terms of ease of construction, what other kind of community resources might be needed or in play for that particular location. And then for all these, under the more resources, we have information about, again, the underlying data sets, various kinds of user guides to help someone work through the individual tours. And so this is just an example for the Marsh Explorer. And finally, again, this has been a community practice. A number of people have engaged in this process. A number of academic partners, a number of the different groups working, on the New Jersey coast, and so we see the NJ Restores as a way, something that will continually to evolve as we move forward. The individual tools, but also the additional tools and refinement. And so, we're rolling this out in terms of CREP. We rolled out a year ago, but in terms of this larger organization suite is kind of rolling out today. And again, we see this as something that we're going to continue to build and add on into the future. So I'll stop my share at this point, and then I think Eric picks up.
Thanks, Rick. So that was a general overview of the models that are used on NJ Restores. I will pause a second for if there's any questions on the general overview. Otherwise, we are going to go into a demonstration and we can answer more site-specific questions. But if anybody has questions about the overview of NJ Restores, you can raise your hand, come off mute, enter it in the chat. All right. And we will pass it off to Eric.
Well, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Rick and Bill. I'm looking at the sign-in list of who's here, and y'all know more about this than I do. So I don't know quite why I'm here to talk about this, but I can give you some site examples. There are some powerhouses, quite honestly, in the restoration community for New Jersey that are on this call, and I'm honored to be here. But what we thought was going to be useful is to take this whole restoration tool and put it into practice. And let's look at a site. Let's see where this actually hits the ground. So as you know, highlighted in some of Rick's presentation, we're focusing on Stafford here. We have some folks from Stafford. Again, they're going to know this area better than I am. But obviously something that we were interested in. Now I gotta figure out how to advance my slide. There we go. Which is Stafford is a river oceanfront and bayfront community. So they have pieces, or it's mostly sorry. There's Ocean County and Stafford. So you're just starting with finding the location, zeroing in where we are here. Again, this is the marsh area just south of Beach Haven West, if you're familiar with that area. And you can see, you know, even just from the mapping, you can see that this area has been heavily ditched, heavily managed through the years. The aerial that you saw there as well shows that there's been some ponding of this area for wildlife. So lots of things going on here. This property is predominantly owned by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And what we find out just in Stafford Township that we have 148 miles of shoreline. This was an area that was hit hard during Sandy. I mean, this marsh was inundated and Beach Haven West took a hit directly because the marsh was low enough in the tidal zone, and we'll look at that here in a minute, that the marsh was inundated, and so Beach Haven West took pretty much a direct shot from when Superstorm Sandy came through. So this tells us, and again, we're just looking at high level stuff here, looking at what's going on in the marsh and whether the marsh is accreting, whether it's retreating, whether it's subsiding. We've got some interior areas of the marsh that we've got greater than 6 feet a year just in this area because we've got some subsidence going on. A lot of these, some of these areas, especially closer to Beach Haven West and Cedar Run Creek, are navigable channels. So what we're seeing here is some of these areas where we're seeing accretion might be navigable channels that we need to actually keep clear for navigation purposes. But maybe we're losing that material from the marsh plain. So as we start to look at these things, we start to paint a picture, we start to see what's going on, and start to build a place where, well, maybe there's some solutions here. The project we're looking at, one of the projects we're looking at right now, I saw Tony's on from DEP. We're working with the Reggie grant component. There is a component site here where we're losing a lot of shoreline, and that is one of the projects that we are working on with DEP and Stafford right now. But we're looking at the marsh adjacent to that, so we know what's going on. We know what we're looking at, and is the problems we're seeing at Popular Point, which is the area immediately adjacent to Beach Haven West, is the surrounding marsh seeing the exact same thing? And what you'll find out is a lot of it we are. And then starts to look at what's tidal range in the area. What, where are we low? Where are we high? And is the marsh getting inundated? What are the swings that we see in this? We know that this is predominantly a monolithic environment where we've got a lot of Spartina, alterniflora in this area when you view it. So that needs to be inundated twice a day, but doesn't need to be inundated 2 to 4 feet. Probably not. So we are seeing some larger swing areas here. This is also important as we start to look at some of the restoration. This is our salinity maps that are available through the Explorer. We start to look at what's the likelihood of success for Spartina alterniflora, for upland plant species, for patents, for where's the line that we're going to start to see intrusion of invasive species. So those are the kinds of things that we look at, where the salinity layers levels are for this. We also look at this from a fauna perspective. Is it an area where we could add oyster castles, or we could add, you know, some kind of living shoreline marsh where we're going to use oysters or clams or something like on that front. Probably, you know, with over 30 parts per thousand of salinity, you know, we're probably not looking at oyster in this area because, you know, they want to be in that 20 range, generally speaking. But, you know, do we see daily changes in that? And these are all tools, these are all pieces that are available within the Restoration Explorer. Again, we look at wave heights here, starting to think about, okay, if we were to do a living shoreline, we're trying to protect this marsh. What levels do they need to be at? What, you know, and these are, like I said, these are 30,000 foot views. But as we start to design our field studies to really dig into and look at the marsh, this is the first place we look at, and we start to look at whether, you know, do we need to be measuring wave heights in this area? Well, we have some data, and we can drill into where that data is sourced from and build that into, you know, potentially permit applications that are coming ultimately to DEP and Army Corps and all those things, as we start to look through each one of these. What are the shore slopes? Are they steep? Are they shallow? You know, can we shallow them up and start to absorb some wave energy? Are we eroding edges? Are we seeing cliffs at the edge of the marsh that are calving off, you know, routinely? All of these things we start to see just by measuring shoreline slopes. And again, I think we talked about this earlier, Rick talked about this earlier, and when you look at the aerials in this, and I actually don't know that I have an aerial of this in the slide deck, I think you saw that earlier in Rick's presentation, but what you'll see is there's some areas of this marsh that have been left alone through the years, and they are in much better shape than the ditched and the ponded areas of the marsh. But if we're doing a study and we're starting to prove this whole thing up, well, maybe that unmanaged area of the marsh becomes our baseline. It becomes, you know, as we're comparing data. And we need to know that. We need to know where those studies are going to be and what kind of modeling needs to be done in order to get the designs together. And this is where we all land eventually. What are we seeing? And especially as we look at towards sea level rise and towards some historic marsh lost. We're looking at the edges. We're looking at what's happening here. And again, popular point here at the eastern extent of this this map is, you know, we can see that the point of that that marsh has taken a beating through the years. The island off the coast has also taken a hit on the edges. You know, we're just not hanging on to them. And predominantly what we find out is that, you know, as we dig into this area, this is the primary fetch, is we're getting a long fetch across the bay and it's hitting this edge hard. So we start to analyze this, we start to do the modeling, and we start to see, okay, well, maybe if we can break some of that fetch, it's not necessarily wave traffic, but we can boat wave traffic that we're seeing here, that may be a component. But really, those are on the edges of the navigable channels, and those channels are small enough and tight enough that you don't see a lot of high speed in there. So it's really, you know, the natural edge that is being hit because of fetch across the bay. And so we need to look at what kind of restoration technique do we need to do for that. Again, marsh edge erosion, you can quantify square footages here. And erosional losses projected by 2050. And that's where I land with just kind of taking a quick look at the site here. We'll open up for questions. We thought it would be good. Rick will open up the tool live, and if we have questions about this particular site, we can do that and just drill into that and see how to navigate through the tool. We thought, you know, this is the kind of information that we would be, like I said, 30,000, 10,000 foot view when we analyze the site just from the initial desktop modeling.
Does anybody have any questions for Eric and the site-specific demonstration he just shared with us? So I think at this point, we're interested in kind of being that technical assistance panel. If anybody has any site-specific projects that they're working on and they want to answer questions for, we're able to open up the tool live and go through that. Does anybody want to share? Hey, Matt.
Hey, Amanda, I would just say, for just going based off of what Dr. Lathrop and Eric just said, one of the things to point out to, I think why Stafford was used, we've done a lot of planning into this. I see Montana's on the call. Like, there's a lot of things that we've done preliminary to be able to set this up. So like the area that Eric and Dr. Lathrop were just showing, we're in the process of trying to get grant funds to be able to look at that, but it's about developing those partners to be able to get there. So we just got funding for Dr. Lathrop. We've been working on stormwater more inland. We just got funded under an ARPA grant to do those bioswales we've been talking about, Dr. Lathrop. I haven't reached out to you because you just got funding for it. We also just got funding to do design, plan, and specs of a Mud City area that was north of to the area you were showing. And the idea behind that is to try to flush out where we can then do capital projects. So, if you have those plans in place, it makes it easier to go after these funds. So I just wanted to point that out for the others that are on the call.
And Matt, to read, to strengthen the point, I mean, that was partly the idea within the tools themselves, or the ability to take screen grabs, to do those municipal summaries and the like, to be able to provide people, some of the support that they might need for developing, project proposals.
Does this tie in, Dr. Lathrop, with the watershed work that you're working with as well?
Not per se. It's kind of, whereas that's kind of the watershed down, this is kind of flipping it and kind of going from the bay, bay in. But there's some connections, but it's not integrated at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Do we have any other takers? Any specific projects that you're working on that you'd like to run through the NJ Restores for?
Hey, Amanda, if nobody's gonna step up, I'll say the Mud City area, which is just north of Route 72.
All right, let's pull it up.
Okay. I will share my screen.
I'll also add, while Rick's doing that, I actually used NJ Restores over the weekend. We're looking to the JC Jack Cousteau National Estuarine Research Reserve. We're looking to acquire parcels as marshes are migrating inward. And so I used the NJ Restores tool, took some screen grabs to justify parcel acquisition for marsh migration planning for our reserve. So that was really cool. That's one way you can use it, justification to organizations or in proposals, looking at those sites with all those layers overlapping.
So I will try, before I could find Popular Point actually showed up. I don't know if Mud City shows up at all, but we'll try that.
I think
Mud City's going to be immediately where it says the Matawan Wildlife Management Area.
Yep.
Is the Manahawkin this area? Or
Yeah.
Okay, so it did actually zoom into to that particular location.
Right where that blue area is highlighted, Dr. Lathrop, the aqua color, that there's 500 acres in there that was just approved to be able to look to try to design and spec out projects for that area.
Okay, so this
Basically all that green area that you're
the
looking at.
darker green. Yeah, and so this is on the SERAP. So this shows that Ducks Unlimited is interested in working in this particular area. So I don't know if they're a partner or not, but that would be someone that maybe could be contacted, could serve as a a partner or collaborator on that particular project. Again, there's different base maps if you wanted to look at, in terms of the imagery for that particular area, or if you wanted to look at, for instance, the topo map, sometimes that has also interesting, place name information that might be, some of these are dated, but give you another view. Is Eric, I'm sorry, Matt, is there anything more specific? We could then go to the Marsh Explorers tool.
Rick, we do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
If somebody can share how the tool calculates CO2 sequestration rates for restoration before and after.
Okay, I can go into, we don't necessarily have the sequestration rates, but I can talk a little bit about how we have kind of valued different marshes in terms of their sequestration potential. So again, we're in the so I'm just bringing up the marsh status for this particular location.
For this location, Dr. Lathrop, just to make it clear, this is to do more of a detailed flush out of what types of projects would work in that area.
Okay.
But based off the our lagoon studies and bathymetric surveys from working with Eric and ACT engineers, we know we have around 800,000 cubic yards of material. And some of that material works in certain situations and some of it doesn't. So we're trying to identify what type of projects would go into that area. Is it there's erosion projects? Is it thin layer disposal? Is
Yeah.
it, wave in inundation projects? That's where the Eric step in, and he doesn't give himself enough credit. That's where he steps in and shows, what's feasible with the material and the type of sediment that's there to be able to pair it up with projects that could that would work.
Sure. Yeah. So as he went through in terms of just information about the marsh platform, in terms of hydrology, but also the low spots and the like, and then the kind of the living shorelines. So that's something we're trying to build out for each. The Living Shoreline Explorer is really gets into the shoreline edge. One of the area that is lacking and needs that we've identified for further development is the marsh platform itself. And so some of the restoration possibilities. So we envision doing something similar, with the living shorelines within the Marsh Explorer to think about, especially in terms of thin layer placement. But I can jump back. Let's see if I go to the SERAP. One of the issues of concern is the carbon sequestration potential. And let me zoom into to a location. And we'll let it go.
As that's loading, I just threw out a question for the group. What criteria do you see as most important in selecting or designing marsh restoration or enhancement projects?
So this is the carbon sequestration potential. And so you can see on the legend, it basically, valued from highest, to low. And if we go in and then within the layer control, let me go back to the layer selection. And then if we go to the I button, that explains more about that particular layer. This gives us more information about how we actually valued the salt marsh carbon sequestration potential. Part of it had to do with the salinity regime, with the idea that coastal marshes above 18 parts per thousand having the highest carbon sequestration potential, basically because there's less methane emissions. It also incorporates information about future vulnerability to loss, as well as tidal restrictions. So there's several different components that went into that particular evaluation. And then this, as we continue down in the background information, it basically gives you, the different criteria that we used in terms of, and then, part of this is the idea is what areas are most vulnerable to the sequestration potential loss. And so where you have high potential, but also high erosion, those are going to be some of the areas that are of particular concern when it comes to the loss of that carbon sequestration. So I don't know if that it's more the carbon stock rather than the particular rate.
Does that answer your question, Tony?
Yes.
Awesome. We have Michael. Hey, Michael, you're on mute.
There we go. Not my first time doing this. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, my own image is frozen on my computer. Anyway, I'm from Bureau of Marine Habitat and Shell Fisheries. I figured I'd ask, are there considerations in this tool or any considerations going forward, thinking about potential conflicts with existing marine habitat of converted marsh or anything like that, with a specific, well, in using this tool, is there a way to consider existing habitat for, say, shellfish or important existing SAV that might conflict with an area that needs or may need marsh restoration? Maybe I'll just leave it at that. Are there considerations for any of that?
Yeah, so let's go back to NJCRC and now we have information on, for instance, seagrass, but we do not have extensive information on in terms of shellfish, lease areas, or the like. Now, I know that there's been a separate, I guess partly the reason why we haven't really built out that component is that that there is a separate tool that you folks were involved with on, more specifically on shellfish.
If anybody has that link handy, I'm searching for it.
But it brings up
New
a good
Jersey.
point in terms of how to link, these tools. We haven't built in that link, but that might be something we haven't thought of, and that's why we're having this today, to think about how we could, as we have additional tools, this particular tab, where we can link to other sites, that might be one we'd want to incorporate.
Yeah, for sure. I think probably most importantly, thinking in thinking of criteria and applicability of specific restoration site enhancement, all that, all the criteria that gets considered there, in the unlikely chance that there's existing SAV in particular as important habitat that's existing in an area that might be suitable for restoration. It may be a good consideration to think about what potential trade-offs there might be in restoring an area that might not have traditionally or not traditionally, but historically had SAV, but does now because of converted or lost upland or marsh habitat. I know that is a potential area of conflict in sort of determining what the ecological trade-offs might be. In losing what is now SAV habitat, that used to be a marsh a long time ago, could be worth, discussion at the very least, and maybe, development of an additional level of criteria, for a tool like this. But I know it's very complicated, but just I guess maybe just a discussion point, to point out from our perspective in marine habitat, for sure.
So in this case, this is taking the most recent mapping of SAV. So if you did have a project area, you'd at least be able to see in terms of the existing mapping where SAV might be something that you need to further to look at. But it's not built into one of the criteria for living shorelines, that Explorer tool per se.
I have a question, Michael. Do you see utility in having, even just visually on here, where shellfish leases are, just the location, so at least someone can say, I know it's in the vicinity or not in the vicinity of. I guess that's one question. And would that be possible to get that? Like, would DEP say, yes, we can get your permission to put it on here? And number two, are natural clam beds or active sort of clam beds mapped, and is that another kind of layer you might want to have in here?
Yeah, so the lease areas, I don't see why that would be an issue. In fact, I think in some of the, well, for sure, the new the new land use regulations that are proposed as part of the NJ Real package includes a subsection that says that living shorelines should not be developed in existing lease areas. So that would be definitely a good thing to have in using this tool, because the rules are going to prohibit that from happening anyway. Yeah, I don't see why there would be an issue there. As far as existing natural clam beds, there are maps with density. Yeah, there are clam density maps available. I mean, they're based on, historical estuarine inventory data that we have. And they're definitely in the GeoHub somewhere. And yeah, they certainly could be useful to incorporate here.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I don't see why that would be. I think that would be accessible. If you want to reach out, and we could try to coordinate. But Bureau of GIS would be good contact for that too, because yeah, and the short to long term plans is for us to improve that data and to resurvey some of those sites that are in desperate need. Same goes for SAV too.
Okay, thank you.
I just threw in the chat. If there's any other questions, we do have time for one or two more. Any site-specific questions to a project you might be thinking about or working on? Danielle asks, wondering if the experts have any input on how future changes in the datums could influence these tools.
I could try to address that. Okay, so in terms of thinking about the future marsh, some of those models based on mean higher high water using NAVD 88. So as datums change, potentially, I mean, that, will change those somewhat in terms of what areas would be flooded, in terms of the depth of expected inundation.
I think it's an interesting question because you're going to see tidal gauges, get updated here as we move ahead, and all of the ground data will be in one set of data and the tidal data will be another. We're going to have that correction is going to have to get made.
Yeah.
And that'll end up being that. I think what we all instinctively know is that, or believe is that, you're going to see that these marshes are drowning more than the current data set will even say that they are.
Yeah.
In a tidal range.
We use, I mean, we correct for the tidal datums using V datum. But again, these models, some of them, the mapping and modeling is 10 years old and does need to be refreshed as the situation changes.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of today. Danielle says, thank you for these tools. I use them to think about trends a lot. Appreciate all of your products, Rick and TNC. We have their contact information up on the screen. I want to thank our panelists of speakers who took the time to present this material to you today, and opening up their schedule to be that technical assistance back and forth. Their information is listed on this slide if you're interested in reaching out. And at the end of today's chat, you will receive a link for a post-event evaluation with a specific opportunity for follow-up on NJ Restores. And we would love to hear from you. Thank you all for joining us today. The recording will be posted hopefully by end of day today, if not tomorrow, on the NJCRC website.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Amanda.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
And Eric. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.